You're just dead weight now, Ben. It's time you stepped aside. That's what my younger brother, Austin, said to me in front of the entire boardroom. No hesitation, no eye contact, just those words, clean and cold. I didn't respond. I didn't blink. I just sat there, trying to understand how we had arrived at this point, how the kid I used to carry on my shoulders when we were both barefoot in the backyard now had the nerve to talk to me like I was nothing. We were sitting in the glass-walled conference room of Carter and Sons Construction, the company we had built from the ground up. Well, technically, I built it. Austin just happened to show up after I laid the foundation, literally and figuratively. But he was the face of the company now. Clean suits, polished speeches, business lunches with city officials, and I was the guy in the boots who still showed up at 6 a.m. with blueprints and a thermos of black coffee. That made me expendable in his eyes. He didn't know what I knew. He didn't remember what I had done 12 years ago. And that's the thing about foundations. You don't always see them until they start to crack. My name is Ben Carter. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent more than half my life in hard hats, steel-toe boots, and the kind of weather that makes men curse under their breath. I don't do boardrooms, I don't do golf with mayors, and I sure as hell don't smile for photo ops. What I do, what I've always done, is build. 12 years ago, I left a steady civil engineering job in Chicago. I had a corner office and a safe track to retirement. But when our old man passed, I came back to Shelby, Texas, to help Austin figure things out. He was fresh out of college, full of ambition and buzzwords, but no clue how the real world worked. The plan was simple. I'd bring in my hands-on experience, get jobs moving, manage crews. He'd handle the money, the marketing, and the licensing. I told him, you handle the handshakes, I'll handle the hammer. And for a while, it worked. In the early days, we were lucky to land porch repairs and church bathroom remodels. I was out in the field before sunrise, laying foundation blocks, pouring concrete in the summer heat, cutting costs without cutting corners. I slept in my truck some nights, ate more gas station burritos than I care to admit. But I believed in what we were building, and more than that, I believed in him. Austin wasn't a bad kid. He was confident, slick with words, good at dressing the part. He started rubbing elbows with city planners, developers, even politicians. It got us contracts, schools, parking decks, even the new firehouse. Our name was finally starting to mean something. But somewhere along the way, the & Sons on the company name started feeling like a formality to him. He started calling himself CEO in public, started referring to me as our lead site manager in meetings. At first, I didn't mind. Titles never mattered to me. I still had my name on the side of the trucks and my boots in the dirt. That was enough, until it wasn't. The shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in like termites, quiet, patient, eating away at the frame of everything we'd built. I noticed him rolling his eyes when I voiced concerns in meetings. I noticed he stopped copying me on key emails. I noticed how people started looking to him, not to us, for direction. And the more I stayed quiet, the more he forgot. Forgot who taught him how to read blueprints. Forgot who guaranteed the loan for our first truck. Forgot who signed the papers on the land the whole company sat on. But I hadn't forgotten, and I hadn't walked away from my past life in Chicago just to be dismissed like a broken drill bit. The land our company sits on, 6 acres of prime industrial space just off Highway 59, wasn't always ours. Back when I first moved back to Shelby, I knew starting a construction company from scratch would require more than ambition and elbow grease. Equipment could be leased, clients could be courted, but land was power, land was leverage, and in a town like Shelby, Land was respect. There was an old lumber mill on the edge of town, shut down for years, surrounded by nothing but weeds and rusted chain-link fence. Most people saw it as junk property, but I saw it for what it was: potential. Concrete slab foundation already poured, easy highway access, water lines still buried and usable, a gold mine, if you had vision. So I made a deal, quietly. Used every cent of my Chicago severance package and borrowed against my retirement fund. No loans, no co-signers, just me, a handshake with the previous owner, and a notary at the county office. The deed went in my name and stayed there. I didn't tell Austin, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't want anything hanging over his head. I told myself, this is for both of us. Let him shine. I'll worry about the foundation, like I always have. That was just the beginning. The first year of Carter & Sons was brutal. We couldn't afford real office space, so I converted a corner of the mill into a makeshift headquarters, folding tables, second-hand filing cabinets, a coffee pot that groaned louder than the workers. When jobs came in slow, I hustled on the side, fixing fences, patching driveways, even painting houses. Not once did I take a paycheck. Austin didn't know that the checks he wrote for miscellaneous expenses were coming right back into our gas tank or the dump truck's new tires. When the county threatened to fine us over zoning issues, I sat in that courthouse for 6 hours straight, arguing our case with nothing but old blueprints, sweat stains on my shirt, and a firm handshake. We won, barely. But it kept us afloat. I remember the day our first big job came in, a 2-story library renovation. I was in the field, pouring concrete into footers when Austin pulled up in a rental car. Grinning from ear to ear, he waved the contract in the air like we'd won the Super Bowl. And in a way, we had. He said, "We made it, Ben." And I believed him. But the truth is, I never made anything for myself. I made it for us. For him. Every late night I spent reviewing OSHA compliance. Every Saturday I spent training green apprentices for $20 a day. Every personal contact I sacrificed from my Chicago network to get us discounted material. I even turned down a job offer, $135K a year plus benefits, from a commercial firm in Dallas, just to stay here and keep this thing moving. I didn't ask for recognition, didn't need my name on business cards or a seat at the Rotary Club. I was just building something I thought we'd both own, something that would outlast us. But Austin, he started changing. He got flashier, hired an assistant just to manage his calendar, upgraded his Ford to a Tesla, then leased an office suite downtown, said it was for meetings only. Suddenly I was getting invoices for brand consultants, social media teams, even catered lunches for staff I'd never met. I raised concerns, quietly. He brushed me off, confidently. Then came the headlines. Carter & Sons expands into Dallas market. But there was no & Sons in the article. Just him, his face, his title. And that's when I knew. The company may have been built on my calluses, my truck, my land, but in his eyes, I had become just another tool in the shed. Replaceable, dull, disposable. Still, I stayed. Because men like me don't quit. We wait. We watch. And when the moment's right, we remind the world who really poured the foundation. It happened on a Thursday. Not that it matters, but some days just stay with you. The kind where the sky looks too calm for the storm that's about to hit. I was coming back from a site visit across town. Small job, fixing the retaining wall behind a public elementary school. The crew had done good work. I'd even grabbed donuts for them on the way in, the kind with the cheap strawberry icing they liked. When I got back to the main office, Austin's assistant, a 20-something kid who had never so much as swung a hammer, handed me an envelope with a stiff smile. "From the executive team," he said, like we were strangers at a bank. Inside was a letter, typed. No greeting, no signature, just cold, legal language. "Effective immediately. Your involvement in day-to-day operations will cease. All site decisions are to be made through the office of the CEO. Access to project files, job scheduling software, and accounting systems will be revoked. We thank you for your years of contribution." I read it 3 times before I looked up. The kid was already gone. I didn't storm into Austin's office. I didn't raise my voice or throw anything. I just sat in the truck outside for a full hour, engine off, listening to the tick of the cooling motor and the low hum of a nearby power line. You ever feel something break inside you, but there's no sound, no flash, just this shift, like a support beam giving out behind the walls of a house. You can't see it, but the whole thing feels different now. That was me. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the long, straight road and the steady churn of memory. He really did it. After everything. After 12 years of sweat and blood and quiet sacrifice, my brother had pushed me out of the very thing we built together. And he hadn't even looked me in the eye to do it. But I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Instead, I walked into the back room of my house, pulled a worn manila folder from a locked file cabinet, and laid it open on the kitchen table. The original property deed, signed, notarized, in my name. Effective July 3rd, 12 years ago, right beneath it, a lease agreement I had written up, more out of formality than anything else. The tenant, Carter & Sons Construction, term, 15 years clause, subject to revocation with 60-day notice. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised. No, I never forgot. I just never thought I'd need to use it. But here we were. And the thing about foundations is this: if you forget who laid them, one day, they'll remind you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table until well past midnight, staring at those documents under the yellow hum of a dusty kitchen light. The same folder I'd nearly forgotten about, tucked away behind tax returns and equipment receipts, now pulsed with meaning like a living thing. I could hear the wind outside, brushing against the siding of the house I'd rebuilt myself, beam by beam. Every creak in the wood reminded me why I'd come back to Shelby in the first place. Not for power, not for praise, just to build something solid, something that lasted. I thought back to the day I signed that deed. The previous owner, Mr. Halverson, was closing down the old lumber mill. We stood by the gate with rust on the hinges and overgrown weeds everywhere. He was tired, ready to let go. I had cash in hand and a vision in mind. I told him, "Give it a few years. I'll turn this into something that works again." He smiled and said, "Make it better than I did." I had. But now I had a choice. I could go back to that office and demand my role, shove the deed in their faces, force my brother to eat his own words. But what would that prove? That I still cared what he thought? No, that would mean he still had power over me. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Raymond Connor," the voice answered. "Who's this?" "It's Ben Carter." There was a pause. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again. I'm calling about 6 acres just off Highway 59. You still looking for expansion space?" Another pause, longer this time. "You serious?" "Very." We set a meeting for the next day, just 2 old-school men talking business. No suits, no lawyers, just facts. I hung up, folded the deed carefully, and placed it back in the folder. Then I poured myself a glass of bourbon, and for the first time in a long time, I slept. Because some storms don't need thunder. Sometimes, it's the silence that brings the house down. The next morning, I was already up before dawn, just like always. Old habits die hard. I boiled coffee in the scratched-up percolator I've had since my 20s and pulled out my work boots, even though I wasn't going to any job site. Today wasn't about labor. It was about leverage. I met Raymond Connor at the old diner off Loop 14. The same place where contractors and city inspectors gossip over grits. He was sitting in a booth near the window, sipping black coffee and eyeing the property sketches I had sent him the night before. He looked older, grayer, but no less sharp. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years, not since Austin had underbid him for a civic center project and then talked trash about him on a podcast. Typical Austin move. "You're serious about this?" Raymond asked. I nodded. Serious as a heart attack. He leaned back, eyes narrowing like he was sizing up a bear trap. "You sure you're ready to burn that bridge?" I didn't flinch. He lit the match. "I just own the road he built it on." Raymond grinned like a man who'd just tasted revenge through his teeth. We spent the next 2 hours going over terms, not just a sale, a transfer of lease, legally airtight, enforceable within 60 days. Raymond's team had been scouting expansion into Shelby County for years, but couldn't touch our location because of zoning and Austin's connections. Now, with me holding the land, Raymond had a shortcut, and I had motivation. I didn't ask for a crazy price. I didn't need to bankrupt him. All I wanted was for the land to go to someone who would treat it better, and someone who could legally remove Carter and Sons from it without a fuss. By Monday, the paperwork was filed. A 60-day revocation notice was sent by certified mail to the Carter and Sons main office, addressed to the tenant, Carter and Sons Construction LLC, signed by the landlord, Benjamin D. Carter. I didn't include a letter. No explanation, no message. Just the cold, clean truth in legal form. Then I waited, and silence has never tasted so good. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance. I worked on small freelance projects, taught some classes at the trade school on weekends. People in town started whispering. Something was shifting. I knew when the letter had arrived at the company office, because Austin's assistant texted me, just 4 words. "Did you do this?" I didn't reply. A week later, Austin showed up at my house. I didn't answer the door. Instead, I watched from the porch swing, hidden behind the privacy hedge, as he paced back and forth, holding the notice in one hand, phone in the other. The cocky spring in his step was gone, replaced with confusion, then frustration, then fear. He had built everything on land he didn't own. On ground he thought he'd claimed through charisma and charm, but he never once checked the deed. Never once asked how that property had come to be ours, because deep down, he never thought he'd need to. He forgot that while he was giving TED Talks and buying company-branded tumblers. I was in the background pouring the concrete beneath his glass office. And now, the clock was ticking. 58 days, then 57, then 56. The company would have to vacate or negotiate, and either way, the foundation was cracking fast. The thing about people like Austin is, they live in noise. Everything has to be seen, heard, announced. Promotions on LinkedIn, project photos on social media, drone shots of job sites with hashtags and speeches. But me, I've always believed in the power of what's unspoken. A few days after Raymond and I signed the lease transfer, I started reviewing site maps and permits. Not to gloat, just to ensure every legal angle was clean. Our original lease with Carter and Sons included a quiet termination clause I had insisted on back in the early days. Austin never bothered reading it. He trusted me. That was his first mistake. His second was forgetting trust only lasts as long as respect does. Raymond's legal team was surgical. The lease termination didn't need a lawsuit, just a notification. No courtroom, no headlines, no way to fight back. Austin couldn't contest the revocation. Not when the land was in my name. Not when the lease was signed by his own hand. Within a week, I started getting calls, not from Austin, but from subcontractors, plumbers, welders, electricians. They were hearing rumors the company was moving headquarters. Others said the building was being sold. One of the concrete vendors even asked me if I'd bought the company. I told him the truth. I just own the ground. What they do on top of it isn't my problem. Inside, I was calm. But I won't lie. There was a small, quiet fire burning. Not vengeance, just justice. On the 15th day, a reporter from the Shelby Weekly reached out for comment. She'd heard from an anonymous source that Carter and Sons was losing their base of operations and had requested a temporary use permit elsewhere. I declined the interview. I had no story to tell. I was just a man who honored a contract. Meanwhile, Austin scrambled. I know this because one of his junior staff, a kid named Marcus I had mentored years ago, texted me. He's losing it, asking if there's any way to fix this. He didn't know you owned the land. No, of course he didn't. Because when you're too busy building an empire for yourself, you forget who poured the cement under your throne. By day 22, I heard he had met with lawyers. By day 30, he tried calling our cousin Daryl, who works in the county zoning office. Nothing worked. On day 38, Raymond's trucks pulled up to the rear lot to begin surveying. That was the first time Austin called me directly. I let it ring. By day 43, the news broke. Not from me, not from Raymond. It leaked through a local business newsletter that had picked up on a zoning application filed in Raymond's name for the property Carter and Sons occupied. The article was short, technical, but it was enough. Within hours, the town knew. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages from former crew leads, vendors, even guys I hadn't spoken to since our first remodel job. Most of them said the same thing. Is it true? You really own the land? Ben, what the hell happened? I didn't reply, not to anyone, because while people talked, Austin's world began to cave in. The first collapse came internally. Half his field crew walked off the job the following Monday. Not out of anger, out of clarity. They saw what was coming and wanted no part of it. Some of them had been with us since the beginning. Guys who remembered me eating lunch with them on overturned paint buckets, hauling beams across unfinished foundations while Austin checked emails from the truck. They didn't say it out loud, but their silence spoke volumes. They had chosen sides. Next came the subcontractors. Plumbers delayed invoices. Drywall vendors started requiring full prepayment. Creditors that once extended 30-day terms now wanted COD. The moment the land situation hit the radar, everyone's risk calculator changed. Suddenly, Austin's confidence wasn't enough. He tried calling me again. Twice. I ignored both. Not because I enjoyed his unraveling, but because I was done fixing things for him. Letting go isn't always violent. Sometimes it's just not picking up the phone. On day 52, I heard he called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't there, obviously, but one of the office staff filled me in. He tried to convince them the situation was temporary, a misunderstanding. Claimed he had spoken with me and we were negotiating. That was a lie. The board wasn't stupid. One of them had already pulled the lease records from the county website. It was public information. My name was right there. Has been for over a decade. You could feel the trust evaporating. Not just in the company, in him. And then came the final nail. Raymond sent a formal notice of land recovery, execution date, day 60. He wasn't playing games. His legal team already had site plans, transition permits, even a pre-approved demolition bid for the warehouse wing Carter & Sons had built 2 years ago. Austin's company had no fallback. The downtown office lease expired in 90 days. The main yard, tools, storage units, and server room were all on site. Without the property, they were homeless, professionally speaking. By day 56, I got an email from Austin. Just one line, please. Can we talk? I didn't respond. Because sometimes, the loudest message is the one you don't send. On day 60, I drove by the property one last time, not to watch them leave, just to see the light bounce off the bricks I once helped lay with my own hands. Raymond's crew was already moving in. Austin's team, gone. No press release, no statement, just silence. And that was the justice of it. Because he didn't just lose a building. He lost every layer of foundation he had ignored for years. Loyalty, respect, memory, blood. In the end, he'd built an empire on my back, but he forgot to ask who owned the ground beneath it. 2 months passed, then 3, and the world kept turning. I didn't gloat, didn't post cryptic quotes online, didn't drive past the old office just to feel something. I let it go, quietly, the same way I'd carried it all those years, quietly. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the porch, watching the sunlight crawl across the gravel driveway. The boots I used to wear every day now sat by the door, caked in dried cement and memory. I hadn't touched them since day 60. Raymond's company moved in fast. Within weeks, they'd rebranded the main building, repainted the trucks, and brought in a crew of seasoned veterans from a nearby city. I visited once, not as a rival, just as a friend. Raymond handed me a hard hat and smiled. "We couldn't have done this without you," he said. I nodded, then waved it off. It's not mine anymore. But the town knew. People in Shelby started seeing me differently. At the diner, folks who used to barely nod now offered coffee refills without asking. A woman I'd never spoken to handed me a slice of pie and said, "For everything you did." Even the mayor sent me a note, handwritten. Some men talk loud. Some men build things that last. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As for Austin, I don't know where he went. Word is he left town, maybe started over somewhere else. No public meltdown, no social media apology, just gone. And that's fine. Because some endings don't need applause. They just need peace. I didn't start a new company. Didn't try to rebuild Carter & Sons under a new name. I did something smaller, something simpler. I started teaching. The local trade school brought me in twice a week to show young guys how to read plans, how to build load-bearing walls, how to pour concrete that doesn't crack after the first winter. They listened, more than I expected. Maybe because I didn't teach from books, I taught from scars. One afternoon, after class, a student stayed behind. "Mr. Carter," he asked, "why don't you run your own company? With all your experience, you could crush it." I smiled. "Son, I already did that. Now I build people." He fired me from the company we built, so I took back the ground it stood on.